Let me ask you some questions about your business. Has your market changed in the last few years? Has it been affected by changes in medical science or in information technology? Have changes in healthcare systems changed how your customers behave? Or have your direct and indirect competitors changed what they do and how they do it? For most pharma and medtech companies, the answer to these questions is a very obvious yes. Almost every life science company is caught up in a whirlwind of change because our sociological and technological environments are changing. And of course, rapid environmental change presents you with a stark choice. You can either adapt or you can become extinct. So for most leaders in our industry, the question that keeps them awake at night is, do I need to adapt my business model? And if so, how? And therein lies the problem. What exactly is a business model? Because even though everyone uses the term, no one can agree on exactly what it means. And if you can't agree on what a business model is, then how can we know if and how we need to adapt? So, as you might already know, my research studies the evolution of business models in pharma and medtech. So today I'm going to share with you what I've learned about what a business model is and how you might think about adapting yours if you need to. Business can draw many lessons from biology because they're both complex adaptive systems. And the first of these is that a business model is analogous to a species. You see, both are collective terms for a number of entities that have similar characteristics. So just like biological species, business models have characteristic traits and behaviors. Biological species have characteristic anatomy and physiology, business models have characteristic strategies and structures and so on. And just like anatomy and physiology are dictated by the proteome and the genome, and so structure and strategy are dictated by a firm's capabilities and its organizational routines. And just as the genome is constructed from base pair sequences, routines, I'll talk more about those in a moment. In practical terms, this means that your business model is not unique to your company. A business model is a group of companies that share the same traits and behaviors because they have similar capabilities, routines, and microfoundations. You probably don't have your own unique business model. You have it in common with other similar companies. The equivalence between business models and biological species means that we can draw some useful lessons from the natural world. So in nature, there's no such thing as a best species. There are only species that are well adapted or poorly adapted to their natural environment. And in business, there's no such thing as a best business model. There are only business models that are well adapted or poorly adapted to their market environment. So in the Amazon rainforest, for example, sloths, piranhas, would each thrive in their own place, but they wouldn't survive in each other's habitat. In exactly the same way, a research-intensive business model like AstraZeneca and a branded generics company like Sandoz may both be successful in their own habitats, but they wouldn't survive in each other's. In my research, I've identified no fewer than 26 different life science business models, each adapted to a particular habitat in the life sciences market. Each of these models has characteristic strategies, structures, capabilities, routines, in the same way that different species have different anatomies, physiologies, proteomes, genomes, and base pair sequences. So when you say that your company has innovation in its DNA, or you say that it has evolved to be patient-centric, or that it has adapted to the market that demands value, then you're not just using a figure of speech. You are understanding that businesses speciate and evolve in exactly the same way that animals and plants do. This conception of business models as species isn't just a clever metaphor. I use it in practice when I help companies adapt their business models to a changing environment. In particular, I use it to answer two critically important questions. First, what does our business model need to be? Second, how do we make the transformation? For the first question, a firm's choice of business model is always a very individual choice. It's driven by the firm's past history, its future goals, and the trends shaping the market. But the business model as species concept, those 26 peaks, help leaders to identify their options. The 26 life sciences models identified in my research helps them to clarify which business model they can choose from. The second question, how to build your model, is helped by the concepts of the capabiliome, routinome and microfoundations that I mentioned earlier. Because you see, just as a genetic engineer might engineer a species by changing its genome and proteome and base pair sequence, you can engineer a business model by engineering its capabiliome, routinome and microfoundations. So that means that once a leader has decided which of the 26 business models to adopt to, they are faced with these three critical questions. The first is, what does our new capabiliome need to look like? Because each business model needs a different set of capabilities, a different capabiliome. For example, a business model that targets small markets requires advanced capabilities in market segmentation and targeting that other business models don't need. But a business model that creates value beyond the product requires capabilities in value proposition design. And each new capability needs different organizational routines, and then those are the sub-processes that make it happen. And so that leads to the second question of what new routines will you need to create those new capabilities. So, for example, segmentation and targeting requires routines for segmenting not just the prescriber or the patient or the payer, but the context formed from all three of these stakeholders. And value proposition design requires routines for identifying the core, augmented and extended needs that the value proposition must address. And then the final question, of course, is what microfoundations will you need to enable those new routines? Because creating a new organizational routines that express themselves successfully as new capabilities requires more than just installing a process. It means building the new microfoundations. The foundations of successful business model adaptation depend on what you do with the people and the teams that make the model work. We call these microfoundations. There are 4 kinds of microfoundations, and each of them has to be aligned to make the routines work and so express the capabilities your new business model needs. You can think of it as answering 4 questions. Do your people have the right attributes, such as their skills and behaviours? Do you have the processes within their work groups to allow those skills to be combined? Are these separate work groups, these separate teams, connected in the right way? And are there mechanisms to ensure cooperation and avoid conflict between the teams? As you can tell from these questions, the process of engineering the microfoundations is just as difficult as genetically engineering an organism. And to remind you of that, I gave them the initials ACTG. So, to summarise, not every life science company needs a new business model. Yours may be working well and you may not be affected by the way the world is changing. But given the pace of sociological and technological change, most leaders of most pharma and medtech companies need to at least consider if and how their business model may need to adapt. And the ideas that I presented today, the 26 business model species, the capabiliomes, routinomes, microfoundations, are concepts to help you do that. I hope you found that useful. If you'd like to know more, get some of the publications that I've written about this, then please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.